To order. Now we're going to call this meeting to order. I don't know if you can hear it. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm sorry we couldn't have ordered better weather, but I'm sure on a dreary day like this evening has become, there's not much else to do. So thank you for joining us on our informational meeting for the Lake Dredge/Lake Ecosystem Restoration Project. I would like to first start with some introductions. We're going to go through and announce the people on my left, then I'll go to the right. Then we will have a presentation by our engineers as they'll explain the projects and the points of the project that are pertinent. We will then open up the meeting to public comment for you to ask general broad questions. We ask that you keep your questions civil, concise. As other people are coming up and asking their questions, I ask you to please remain silent in the audience so we can be respectful of those people's time and we can hear what they have to say. Likewise, so we can hear the response from our engineers. I ask that any property-specific questions, so if you've got a question on your boat slip or your pier, that we hold those questions off until after the meeting has concluded. Our engineers will stick around to be able to answer questions specific to properties. We've got 3 of our engineers here, and we can take care of property-specific questions at that time. General project questions, please feel free to come up.
Can we pledge a flag?
That is a great start. We will do a quick Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence, as is tradition, and then we'll do introduction. So if you could, can you lead us off?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. One more time.
All right. So I'm just going to start off, and if we could work our way down, and then when we get to Carl, I'll then take it back up to Don. But I am Chris Laudis, Town Manager for the Town of Cedar Lake.
I am Jennifer Sandberg. I am the Clerk Treasurer for the Town of Cedar Lake.
Rick Shaw, Town Council President, Cedar Lake.
Ralph Miller, Town Council.
Julie Rivera, Town Council.
Colleen Sheehan, Town Council.
Bob Carnahan, Cedar Lake Town Council Member. Nick Recupido, Cedar Lake Town Council Member for Ward 3.
Terry Bogley, Conservation Officer.
Bill Fisher, Cedar Lake Police Chief.
Carl Brittingham, Deputy Chief.
Before we get to the engineers, I would like to also acknowledge we've got 2 of our 3 citizen members for the Lake Ecosystem Restoration Project. We've got Dan Pager and Doug Spencer in the audience. Unfortunately, Bob Gross could not be with us today due to temporary health concerns.
Frank Browngill. Frank Browngill is...
Oh, my apologies. And we've got Frank in the audience as well. Don, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Don Oliphant, Christopher Burke Engineering.
TJ Gordon, Chris Burke Engineering.
Thomas Burke, Christopher Burke Engineering.
All right, Don, I will kick it off to you.
Well, and I believe Tyler Russell from Dredge America is online.
As well as Brad. From
Yeah,
Dredge
Brad
America.
Miller, I believe, is online as well.
Yep.
They wanted to be here. One of the ones that was going to be here had a baby recently, so we're doing this a little remotely now. So, thanks, Chris. The general history of this project is probably older than me. I'm 42. A lot of the guys on the Lake Eco Restoration have been kind of hounding this project for years, probably since the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I think the last time we did a ribbon cutting, there were a bunch of boards up here that kind of explained much of the history, a bunch of news clippings that I'd personally never seen before either. So I think it was a lot of those people's foresight that kind of got us to the point that we're at now. This has progressed over several decades. Christopher Burke alone has been working on it since probably 2006, running it through the Corps of Engineers for almost the last 15 years. Us getting through feasibility study after feasibility study, and trying to get to a point where everybody's comfortable both financially and you know, is the project going to work type phase, and we're here now. So the town opted to kind of go on their own outside of the Corps because we could do it cheaper. So we started the engineering on this about 2 years ago, as what we kind of called a phase 1 study, and then moved into phase 2. The initial kind of stage 1 of construction was our sediment dewatering facility over on the west side of town, just southeast of Parish and 155th. That was completed by Dyer Construction last year, end of last year. If you've been down Parish, you can kind of see it a couple hundred feet off the road. It's a large embankment, it's about 10 feet deep, it's about 44 acres, and that's where we're going to be pumping the effluent from the lake dredge to. It's about kind of a 2-mile pipeline that runs all the way from the lake, and that's the shortest pipeline, about 60 feet in height, and it'll kind of shoot it into there, and it'll settle out and return back to the lake as well. So it's been a project. It's been a long time coming. I know a lot of you out there and a lot of residents never thought this day would come. Some people I've talked to still think it's not coming. But if you've been out around the lake, you've seen Dredge America, who's our contractor, using a whole bunch of 16-inch plastic pipe. You'll see it kind of in the old South Shore Golf Course parking lot. You'll see it on the west side of Lowerman, where the pipeline's going to come out of the water near Pinecrest Marina. And you'll see it kind of looping around back into the Lake Heritage Parks Foundation land and then head over to the SDF. So the project itself, if you want to kind of look over to your left, that's the project in a nutshell. It's kind of an overview of the project and areas that we're planning on dredging over the next 3 years. The project timeline is the dredge should be in the water probably in the next week or two. There's not a set date, but we've kind of just heard mid-May, and then they will start dredging towards the end of May. So somewhere in that timeline, there's about 12 different areas showing up there of areas that we will be dredging. The dredge company will be starting in the northeast quadrant, which in turn is actually our largest dredge area as well. About 280,000 cubic yards out of there, and they will primarily be up in that area most of this year, if not all of this year. So as you can imagine, that will be our longest pipeline segment as well. It'll pretty much run the entire 2 miles of the lake, give or take. And then they will move into the other areas as kind of we get into 2024 and 2025. So they're contractually obligated to finish the job by the end of 2025, so it's a strict 3-year project. If they finish early, it's great, but they're allowed to, go all the way up to that time if that's what it takes. The dredging kind of times, the daily operations. So, like I said, there will be a pipeline in the water. This year it'll be stretching from Pinecrest Marina. It leaves the lake kind of through one of their slips before it kind of hits Lowerman, and then it jogs down around Lowerman. But there will be a pipeline in the water kind of zigzagging all the way up to their dredge area. They are allowed to dredge daily from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And dredge every day. They'll be dredging Monday to Sunday. For 2 reasons. One, it's more efficient for them. They can get the stuff done quicker. It's actually a safety consideration as well. Initially, they were contractually obligated to stop on Sundays. We all thought it'd just be good to give everybody a break, but it's actually safer for them to be out there and dredging with the pipeline and to be kind of being observing boating activities, be able to respond to any hits if there are any. We don't anticipate any, but it's actually safer. They can also, when there's material in the pipeline, they can keep it sunk a lot more as well. So there's a chance when they're not dredging, it can float in some areas that they don't anticipate. So it's actually better for them to be dredging, throughout the day. And then, like I said, the overall timeline, 2025, and then they will have a winter shutdown period, most likely sometime around Thanksgiving, but it's really dependent on weather. Obviously, they can't dredge once the lake becomes, semi-frozen over. So that's going to be dependent each year. They don't really have a fixed date when they're going to stop or even start back up again. This year, the lake barely froze over sometimes. So in a time like that, You know, they may be dredging longer periods, but like I said, that's just gonna be dependent on our weather. We got a whole lot of rain now, we'll see if it freezes later on in the year. Boater and resident safety, so that's our number one priority during this entire thing. We understand that a lot of people in the community use the lake, especially around holidays and just weekends generally. So that's a major point of this meeting, not only to give you updates on the project itself, but kind of how daily operations are going to function. So there's an exhibit over to my left. Something similar to that, it's probably not quite final yet, will be posted at essentially every major boating access point, so Marina Point, Pinecrest, North Point, the state boat launch, and then most likely here at Town Hall. And accompanying that will be kind of a flyer that will also kind of give you some directions about, you know, how far to stay away from the dredge, where boat crossing points will be, typical safety features you're going to see out there, you know, warning buoys, crossing points, like I said, and then also where the actual pipeline is floating. You will also kind of see buoys for that. A lot of the warning signs up there will be similar to that. Our crossing points, which will be kind of vetted once they get the pipeline in the lake, they will be designated with two, basically a red and a green buoy that'll be flashing, so typical channel type buoys. And then for floating sections, you'll have a warning buoy every 100 feet, and then a lit warning buoy every 250 to 300 feet. And then any sunk section will be sunk a minimum of 6 feet, so there should be no props hitting sections that you can't see. All private piers are required to maintain access to them 24/7. We don't expect any issues with private piers and access to and from your boat ramps and your docks. And then emergencies. If you do see something, if something does occur, please call 911. That's the direct, everybody's been kind of given that direction, the contractors, our staff, anybody involved in the project. Weekdays, obviously, police and fire do have boats, but they don't patrol it unless there's an emergency. DNR and Terry staff does patrol it on the weekends, correct? So you'll see that same rotation. They've been brought into the fold to kind of, hopefully they can understand everything we're doing, and we're going to try to work in tandem with them and with police and fire to keep this as safe as possible. Do you guys have anything to add from police-wise? You're good?
Just call us if you need us.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully we never have to call them. That would be the goal. And then really that's all I have, just generally. And then really the point of the meeting is for everybody here. If you have any specific questions, operations-wise, what we're doing, anything like that, we'd be happy to answer them. So feel free to come up to the podium if you have any questions, or if it's that easy, that works too.
Hi, Claudia Carlson, 8134 Peterson Boulevard. We are next to Pickerel Creek. Is my understanding that the water is going to come back through Pickerel Creek?
Yes.
Is that, whatever you call it, culvert clear?
That is something we're going to be monitoring more and more and more. So Pickerel Creek is the kind of major waterway of basically the South Marshland area. That will be the main return area from effluent back from the SDF that comes back to the lake via gravity. That culvert has a history of getting pretty clogged up with a whole bunch of trees and muck that comes out of there. So we've alerted Public Works to that, and they need to keep an eye on it pretty regularly, because that's a very important outlet back into the lake. So yeah.
We do have someone online. Amy has her hand raised. Go ahead, Amy. Unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, if you state your name and address, please.
Amy has 13426 Dewey Street, Cedar Lake.
mic is yours.
Okay, I just had a question, it's just like, what are we doing with the materials that we're dredging up, and maybe this has come up before?
The material that we're dredging out, kind of gets pumped through our pipeline. It's a 16-inch HDPE fused welded pipeline. There's going to be 2 booster pumps. There's going to be one floating in the lake, and there's going to be one at Pinecrest. That will lift the material through the pipeline into the SDF. We'll be pumping about 15 to 20% solids, and that will settle out in the SDF, which has the ability to hold about 515,000 cubic yards. Depending on how much that settles out.
Things like coins and, guns or things like that?
No.
Separated out?
So the hydraulic dredge actually has a cutter head at the kind of bottom of it. It's almost like a vacuum in a way. It's got, I think, around 50, you got the teeth, Julie, in your car?
I got one.
The cutter head tooth is about that big.
She's on phone.
Yeah, it's about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches tall, steel, and it rotates, and it will grind up a lot of the bigger stuff. We do anticipate finding, a potential snowmobile, car, stuff that we can't dredge out, maybe petrified wood stumps, stuff like that, which will be left and removed later. But anything small of consequence will get ground up, and you probably won't ever see it again. It'll settle out with the soils in the SDF and be kind of part of that mucky soup.
We do also want to clarify, we do not encourage anybody to go near the SDF site, especially once it becomes active. It's essentially going to become quicksand, so don't try to find anything that you've lost in the lake. It's been donated to the lake already.
Yeah,
It's like a sludge, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a chain link fence going around the facility with barbed wire.
No barbed wire. There's no barbed wire.
Maybe to be determined. But no, it's definitely no trespassing, and as Chris said, it's extremely unsafe to walk in that. You will most likely not be able to get out.
It will look solid too, is the problem. So.
Yeah, especially in maybe like the winter time, whenever the water comes off of it and it looks a little frozen out there, it'll get a real good, like, 1 or 2 inch crust across the top of it, and it'll look pretty solid. And it won't hold a person. You'll get out to the middle where there's a little more moisture, and it'll fall through.
Yeah, so tell your friends, tell your kids, don't go look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Additional public comment? Please come up, state your name and address.
Carl Sprague, 7326 West 143rd Avenue, Cedar Lake. I have 3 questions. How many crossing points do you anticipate in the lake?
Tyler, do you want to jump onto that one? Or Brad?
Right now, we're anticipating 3 crossing points in the lake. I don't know, Dawn, did you get that map?
We did.
Printed out there?
Yeah, there were 3 on there. And those are gonna, they may not be that exact point, but.
Kind of general areas right now until we get the pipe ran and we see how it is. But that's the areas that we anticipate having pipe crossings at right now. The reason for only having one on the north is due to the pipe needing to be able to move the dredge around up there on the north end of the lake.
The pipe crossing area, the width, have you anticipated that based on the amount of boat traffic?
Tyler?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
What's the width of the crossing?
We can make them wider or narrower if we need to. Typically, on a lake this size, we'd probably make them about 100 foot wide.
Okay. Number 2, the floating pipe outside of the sunken areas, will that be a normal day-to-day activity? In other words?
Sorry.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
As we're dredging, sometimes we have to shut down to check the pump or something. If we run into trees or any other debris down there that does get stuck in the pump, usually like a lot of rocks and trees, wood pieces, we'll have to flush a short section behind the dredge so that it makes it easier for us to prime the pump back up. And so we'll have a small section float right behind the dredge, but once we get back up and going, that section moves all the way down the pipe. That HDPE pipe that's not weighted in the crossing sections can come up and down depending on how much load it has in it at any given time, how much percent solids it has. It's completely neutrally buoyant, so with just water in it, it will float just to the surface. But with any amount of material in it, more than about 5% material, it'll start sinking back down.
And then my other one, the lights that you're going to have at night, will they be functional 24/7?
The lights?
Yes, sir.
Yes, well, the lights will come on, they're solar powered and they respond to daylight. So if it's a real dark, it'd have to be an extremely cloudy day, they would come on. But they will be on all night long, blinking between, I think it's 40 and 60 blinks per minute.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Tamara Paulison, 13626 Moore Street. So my question is, because you're not doing the whole lake and you're only doing portions of it, what was the criteria for determining the areas that you're going to do?
So we essentially have two surveys we're working with right here. We did a bathymetric survey, which surveys the bottom of the lake, and then we took several hundred sediment samples and cores and soundings. So that's set, so we have bathymetric set the bottom of the lake, and then the soundings set the hard pan bottom of the lake. If you overlay those on top, that's what we're trying to remove. Our inner shoreline limit was based on an 8-foot depth to the hard pan, and then we took it out into the lake, and then we're removing anywhere from 0 to 3 feet of sediment, and then obviously fiscal constraints about how much we could actually remove. And basically we tried to hit the areas that had the deepest parts of sediment and the shallowest areas and pull those out, because those are the sediments that have basically the best chances of churning up with prop wash, and that's kind of what gives us a little not very clear lake. And that's generally how we chose a lot of those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Minnick, 13930 Hobart Street. When you guys are dredging, is that gonna be bringing stuff up and making the lake, unsafe as far as the water quality?
I don't know if it's a water quality thing. Tyler, you can talk to this too. Immediately around the dredge, there will be some, obviously it's going to get kind of cloudy through there, just the nature of the dredge. Tyler, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, you're gonna see some, like turbidity is what's called, some muddy water around the lake, but pretty much everything we dig, we're gonna suck up all the materials. You're not gonna get any material or any mud. You're not gonna build up any material around anything else we've already dug.
So just like, there's a lot of rumors on what's on the bottom of that lake.
Yeah.
I've heard them the whole time I've been here,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's what I'm kinda wondering, are we gonna be stirring up E. coli, stirring up all that stuff? Is that...
I don't think E. coli is an issue.
It
shouldn't be. We do have effluents of concern that we have in our IDEM permit that we have to test for on different kind of bases based on the permit. I think there's 13 or 15 different things we're testing for. That's part of the reason for getting the sediment out, because there is some stuff in it. As far as I know, there's nothing to a limit that would be harmful, but there is stuff in there that we do have to check for. Like Tyler said, the goal is to, where they're dredging, should suck up a lot of that material that is being disturbed. So there shouldn't be any issues with water quality that I'm aware of.
Okay, and if there is, how are we gonna find out? I mean, last year, I think they shut it down for a little bit, and you didn't even know if somebody posted on Facebook something, you know what I mean? And it was
Yeah.
there was nobody knew.
So the county health department tests the lake how often?
I think every Thursday roughly.
Every Thursday. And that's what was shutting the lake then. That was an E. coli issue, and that was, I think, right out here.
Yeah, that was localized to just this one small area, and since we weren't dredging, it had nothing to do with the dredge.
And part of that is dependent on the, fowl that are out there. They go in there and they have discharges, and that's sometimes what causes the bacteria in the lake.
Yeah, so we have an ongoing assumption that the geese that also enjoy the lake, defecate near the lake shore, and it immediately washes to where the health department tests.
Yeah, I understand it's a lake, you know what I mean? I get it wrong, you know what I mean? But I'm just asking, you know what I mean, is that gonna be kicking that stuff up? And
It shouldn't.
also, so when you dredge, is there gonna be anywhere to get like live updates cause I like to go out on the weekdays when nobody's out there, you know what I mean? And stuff changes all the time out there. Is there gonna be any way where I can just look and see, you know, okay, I can't go here, can't go here?
Yeah, if there's any major updates, so I mean, the dredge actually is gonna move pretty slowly. It's not gonna be jumping around from one spot to the next, like within a week period, especially in this first year, as we're dredging in our biggest area. As we get into some of the smaller areas, they will be moving a little quicker. We can kind of give you updates. We can put it on,
Create a
Facebook or
town website page, and we'll just have, we'll update the town website specific to the lake dredge, and if we get an update from the contractors that they're moving into a new area, we'll update our page and try and put it out on social media.
Okay. One more thing, or two more things, you know, when you say you have the boat crossing area, and I can see where the pipeline's coming down the middle of it, there's a lot of idiots out there, you know what I mean? And they come day to day, you know what I mean? Is there gonna be any information at Pinecrest, you know, like a big billboard saying don't do this or don't do that, or?
Not billboard, but there's gonna be a sign very similar to that one, and like, I don't know if you were here when we first started, we're also gonna be creating brochures to hand out at all the access points. So Pinecrest, we've been in conversation with Bob Gross, the property owner. He's gonna take a stack. I know we're gonna try and give some to the chamber so they can hand out any of there, and we're gonna keep a stack here and any other public access point that wants copies of those brochures to give out.
I mean, are they gonna be like giving it out when you launch a boat? Or, you know, a lot of people only come once a month, and they're probably not.
I can't control how they hand it out, but I suspect we've got Diane Justice in the audience here, that will be the goal, is to give them out to anybody and everybody that's gonna come and put a boat into the water or watercraft into the water.
Okay.
To have them
So,
do that.
another thing maybe on those pamphlets too is, you know, if that line's running right down the middle, and generally on a smaller lake, I mean, anywhere you go counterclockwise with tubing and everything, is there gonna be any of that information on there to tell people, hey, you know, you're on a tube, you kinda go this way, you know what I mean? Because you always have somebody going the wrong way, you know, I mean.
I think that this is a non-directional lake. I think that's the problem with that.
I understand, but
Yeah,
in
some
this,
lakes are directional, and unfortunately, we're not.
in this situation though.
Historically, though, that's what they usually do, right? But our lake does not have a statute that regulates directional flow.
Well, maybe not a statute, but you could have a recommendation, you know what I mean?
Right, and most people do, for the most part,
I think that a
follow
lot
that.
of people just don't know, you know what I mean? And that's why they go that way and not that way, you know what I mean? So, maybe if that's some information.
Part of the insert or
on
something.
there, you know what I mean? It's not a law, but maybe if everybody's going the same way, it'll avoid a lot of problems on
Sure.
that, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people would. I don't think people are trying to go the wrong way. I think they just don't know.
My only hesitation with that, A, it's hard to control, and B, it just takes one person to ignore it.
Right.
And then you got everybody going north and you're going south. And
That's fine, but if you put
large
the
issue.
information out there, at least it's out there, you know what I mean? Wouldn't take much just to put it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People don't have to do it, it's not a law, but
Yeah.
if it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think like I said, there's a lot of problems, people just don't know.
Yeah,
You know what
we
I
can
mean?
discuss that, yeah.
So,
Mr. Salatas, if the folks have active 911 or smart 911 on their phone, we can send out rig notifications if the lake does happen to get shut down by the health department, which unfortunately does happen on a yearly basis, especially when we have a drought. So we can do that as well if need be, but you need to have that activated on your phone. It is free, it's free through the town. All you have to do is put it on your phone. We will help you set it up if you need to. The police department will, so all you gotta do is ask us. We can do it right at the police station, so. Sets it up right on your phone. You'll get a text message from the town whenever there's something going on, and we can help you with that.
Okay, and one last thing, if they do come upon, so like a petrified tree or whatever, or something under there that they can't get out, are they gonna be marking it so that in the future there will be a map of that?
Part of the specification for dredging is that they mark it. And
But is that gonna be available to us, that information?
The anticipation would be still to remove it. The anticipation would be to mark it for removal. So, and yeah, if it's shallow, we'll certainly keep it marked out there so nobody runs into it with the property or anything like that, but that's a pretty large unknown about what we may or may not find out there. But we do have some procedures built into the contract that they will be marked and hopefully removed.
Okay, so when those things get removed, I mean, obviously I'm not gonna go where they're dredging.
Yeah.
But, you know, before they move to another area, is that gonna be removed before then? So that people, you know, think that area is open because the dredge is out of there, but then they still got stumps that need to be removed? Or, I mean, is it all gonna be that area's done?
That's kind of a to be determined. Depends how big it is, depends on what it is. Obviously, if it's something that's rather shallow, we'll want to remove it quicker than later. But if it's something like a car, that may take a little longer to remove. So it really just depends on what it is. That's a hard question to answer right now, without knowing what it is.
We're gonna have a long reach excavator on a barge, so anything that's in our way, to a certain extent, we will get out of the way and load on our barge and haul ashore and get it hauled off.
Yep. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
We have one online.
All right.
Barb Orzi, please unmute yourself and ask your question. We will need your address, please, for the record.
Yes, Barb Orzi, 10290 West 138th Place. First off, I'd like to say thank you for this presentation. It's exciting, it's informative, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So thank you again. I'm not a kind of a water person, so my question maybe is kind of, I don't think it's a dumb question, but is there any useful function for the sediment that's removed at the end, and then what happens to the dewatering facility and the piping when the project is done?
So, Barb, first off, there's no stupid questions, so thank you for attending. The long-term goal of the SDF is kind of in flux. I'll hit the pipeline now. The pipeline will be removed by Dredge America at the end of the project. So sometime late 2025, depending on when they finish, that will be removed. The SDF, do you want to talk to the long-term plans of it?
Yes, the long-term plans for that property, which is approximately 114 acres, will be to, and I believe it's the town's goal this year and probably into next year, depending on how long the process takes, to create a comprehensive plan for that site to turn it into a sportsplex. So ultimately, once the sediment dewatering facility is done with its useful life, that property will start to be developed into a park property.
Oh, okay. So the sediment sits where it is, and they will put stuff on top of it. All right, thank you.
Yeah, it'll be bulldozed. The sediment will still have to kind of dewater, probably for a couple of years after the project is completed. So it'll be some time before it's bulldozed and kind of flattened out.
The nice thing with a 114-acre site is you can't develop it all at once. So we've got time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we need to remember that State Senator Sue Lansky helped us get the money to buy that property, which I'm grateful for. God rest her soul.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening. My name is Brian Devries. I live at 13701 Lowerman Street. I'm a lakefront owner as well as a business owner in town. With respect to the public, and I know at the beginning of the meeting you focused on any specific, site-specific questions on your docks, on your boat lifts. I get that, but I touched probably 300 of those, so I'm going to generalize my concern, and I've expressed it at meetings as far back as October 2021 fundraising meetings, is more on the depth of the lake. The last 3 years specifically, we've been at 10, 16, and 18 inches below normal level. 2019 being the worst of it in the last 3 years. Those years, for many of my customers, taking boat lifts out of the waters has been a challenge. So it's going to add burden to the work that we do, but also every resident that I work for, because the additional work to get there, it's a seasonal lake, and I'll back up a step. You know, being a state-run lake, unless you're grandfathered in, your facilities have to come out every year. It's a temporary, pier configuration, and anything that's not needs state approval. So with that, the majority are temporary piers that need to come out each year, as well as the boat lifts. My concern is, that the dredging is going to impact the depth of the lake. And I can't remember who I was speaking with that gave the presentation about 2 years ago, but I was told that the depth change would be marginal. And that was given a 4 to 6 inch, difference in water elevation. With 4 to 6 inches is significant on any day for this lake, let alone a drought year. So what are contingency plans in place or to be thought of if we're in a drought year, the water's not returning as expected, and, is there any high level plan at this point? Because at the end of the year, typically October, we'll start to see some rain again, and the lake will fill back up over the winter time, great, but what if we have 400 boats stranded on their boat lifts? What if all these access points at the marinas are inaccessible, or you can't even get a boat on a trailer to get it out of the lake? These are big concerns, and I just want to understand the contingency plans that this project and the town is considering. We need the work to be done, but we also need to understand the impact to the residents, our guests, the impact to our business community, if the project is not going to plan. Finally, I appreciate the map and the feedback on schedule, but as I said at the one of the last town council meetings, all of our major projects in town have a specific link on the website that gives updates on the project. At a minimum, you say there's 12 areas, let's call it location 1 or area 1 through 12, and at your high level schedule, identify what years or what quarter of a year. Give us some information on schedule, and when that changes, you update it. Simple. I'm in construction, I get it. But not having a map to say zone 1 or area 1 leaves us in the dark. North end means a lot to all of us. Northeast, northwest. To me, it's north end. I grew up on the north end of the lake. So a little bit more definition to what you're doing. I think the map at the launches are going to be key. But you're going to, again, gentlemen, we have some interesting folks that come visit our lake. You're going to need to use crayons for some folks, and you're going to need to be pretty detailed with others. So I just ask that, thank you first of all, for having the meeting tonight. I think it's overdue, and I think a lot of those here who have been a part of the project for a long time should have been a little bit more prepared to have this meeting. We're weeks away from the actual dredging, and a lot of questions from many folks. As the president of the Chamber of Commerce, our office shouldn't be fielding all these questions 15 to 20 a day at times. It's draining our resources, okay? So more information is better than we've received. And, again, I think a lot of folks, not only residents, but visitors, the depth and the contingency plans are, my biggest concerns right now. I don't want to charge my customers extra, but if it takes me 6 guys to get a lift out of the lake, when it normally takes me 2 or 3, if I can't reach my barge to the shore, we need to plan accordingly, and we're under a time crunch, like you said, with the weather. Yep. Early November, last year, November 15th, we had a 3-inch freeze, and then we had nothing. That impacts when I have to have everybody out of the water, so I appreciate your time and for having a meeting.
A lot to touch there. Margaret, there is a link on the current town's website, correct? There's some older information on it, we can update it with the newer.
Correct.
So,
Yes, we can get it up.
we'll update that, have it more pertinent, to actually see where it's at. And we'll update that as much as we can throughout each year.
And if I can add, if you use the search bar and type Lake Eco Restoration System, it'll take you to the page, and there are sliders on the front that actually will show you, and if you click on the more information when that picture is up, it will take you to the link as well.
Yeah, so we'll update that probably hopefully the next week or so and put this on there. I think there's an older version of the map up there now. Going to the drought questions, luckily it hasn't been a problem so far this year. I hope it continues. But there will be an inevitable drop in the lake level. And it's a ratio and function of how big the lake is and how big our SDF is, how much we're holding. So it's gonna be variable. But a rule of thumb, so it's essentially, the lake is 780 acres. Our SDF is 44 acres. It's a 17-ish, 18 to 1 ratio. And a rough kind of ratio calculation between those two numbers and what we pump. If we're holding 2 feet in the SDF, and we can hold up to 8, that equates to roughly a 1.4 inch drop in lake levels. If we go up to halfway at 4 feet, it's 2.7, 6 feet, 4.1, 8 feet, which is the max, that's 5.4, sorry. That's conservative in the fact that we're not pumping 100% of water out. It's about 15, like I said before, 15 to 20% solids, out of 100% of the water for pumping, and that's also assuming we're not returning anything to the lake either. So those are kind of worst case numbers, and if we continue and don't have a drought, continue to get the rain we're having, we don't anticipate any huge issues. Contingency plans, Tyler, do you guys, you guys do this all around the country, do you guys see large issues in, lake levels of that drop causing big issues with pier access, dock access, and we do have some shallow areas, especially on a lot of the fringe parts of this lake. So Tyler, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, we dug almost 400,000 yards out of a lake in Iowa last year, and we lost maybe 2 inches of water over the whole lake. So I don't think we're going to lose much water in that lake with what we're doing.
That was with a dredge larger than what this one is that moved close to twice the amount of gallons per minute.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the answer to the question, we don't envision huge issues, but we'll certainly be monitoring it, and hopefully we don't get many droughts and there shouldn't be any problems. So, does that answer your question, Brian?
It does, thank you, and again, we hope we don't have any drought, but we've had a drought for 3 years in a row. So, again, I want there to be a public plan and understand, Johnny homeowner on the lake here, what we have to do.
Yeah.
Do we have to moor our boats off our lifts? We need to take them out anticipating it's going to go further, lower. I've been on the lake for 45 years. We've had some significant droughts. 89, good example.
Yeah. It's something we'll monitor. And if we start seeing long periods without rain and we start dropping below the weir level, then it's something we'll have to discuss.
And if we see that water quality coming back is not gonna meet our standards, we can let everybody know that, you know, the lake might drop some, but I don't anticipate that any at all. For sure this year, maybe, you know, it could happen next year, but I don't see that happening at all.
Yeah, and that's one of the other unknowns. We have sediment samples throughout the lake, and we have a good idea what we expect for settling times. Like I said before, we have to meet certain effluent requirements before we release back into the lake. Obviously for pretty obvious reasons, we don't want to take out and put back exactly what we took out. So we don't anticipate those settling times extending out that long, so we should be returning lake water relatively quickly. I think the first year is actually the year we won't be returning as much, just because on the initial, once we need to get stuff into the SDF to settle out. But once we start getting into it more, it'll be more and more returned on a more consistent basis. So, like Tyler said, we don't anticipate it, but it's something we'll keep an eye on.
You mentioned you took a lot of samples, Chris. Did you T-clip these samples to determine what the sediment would be and what the disposal potential might be in the future?
What's in it and the disposal of it?
Yeah, because in this lake, as well as it's been here with all the boats and all the sediment, the phosphorus, the benzenes, and all the things that are in there, if you don't run a T-clip, you don't know what the potential environmental hazards are with the sediment. So my question would be, is that something that you also did?
So those samples kind of guided IDEM in how they structured the permit we have to meet. We were required to do sediment samples to figure out what was in the sediment and what doesn't want to go back in, you know, how much of each pollutant of concern is in those sediments. But if you're asking about later on when we demo the SDF effectively?
Yeah, when you demo or you turn it into a residential park, those are things that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, and a lot of the issues a lot of the pollutants that we're looking at now are more issues in water than they would be on soil itself, and especially with how much we're going to be mixing that, it'll be very much diluted, I imagine. So we don't anticipate any issues, but that's kind of the next phase.
My only recommendation would be, as you generate these levels in your retention area, that you do systematic sampling of T-clips. So if you run into a problem, maybe you stop where you're putting it, you put it somewhere else, and you figure out how you can remediate that area, just as a recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Al Peisel, 8145 Lake Shore Drive. First of all, thanks everyone for having us here tonight and giving us all this useful information. My question is kind of a follow-up to the crossings over the pipeline. If I understood this correctly, starting on the northeast corner of the lake, so the pipeline's obviously going to start out running the whole length of the lake.
Yep.
During pumping, the pipeline's going to settle to the bottom of the lake or near the bottom of the lake. At the crossing points, not an issue. What happens with crossing points at night after 7 p.m. when the pumping stops? When the crossings close or you can't travel from east to west on the lake? Or what's going to be the situation there and how's that going to be marked?
No, Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, the crossings will be permanently anchored, right?
Yeah, the crossings will always be on the bottom, unless there is a air pocket that comes through there. That's what we're saying, to go, you know, no wake through the crossings.
Okay,
but
so at least
they'll be on the bottom all the time.
So in theory, the crossings will remain open 24/7, hopefully. Cool,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, at night we will, we'll take our pipeline and make sure our whole pipeline's sunk. That way, if someone does cross between the buoys, it should be sunk. But during the day while we're operating, it could float up and you could hit it.
What Tyler's getting at there is, like whenever we're starting up and shutting down, sometimes a little bit of air gets trapped in the pipeline and it'll shoot through there. It'll go pretty quick, and it may lift those sections of pipe up just a little bit. but we're gonna have steel on that pipe that will hold that pipe down on the bottom all the time. There will also be green buoys on either side that have white, letters on that say pipe crossing, so you'll know exactly where those are at. If they drift to the east or the west just a little bit, you'll still know where they're at.
Hello, everybody. My name's Frank Lewandowski. I live at 13701 Lowerman. My question is, since the whole area is pretty much serviced by one well or many wells, is the sediment area at some point going to affect the water seeping into some of the ground sources that supply water to everyone?
We're not anticipating that. So we took geotechnical borings of the entire SDF site prior to construction. It's actually a very heavy clay bottom. There was one area that was sandy, and we avoided it. All the drain tiles, since it was an agricultural parcel prior, were capped. So actually, we got some pretty good news of how well they got capped early this spring, is that if you go out to the site now, it's actually holding water right now, below the outlet.
Great news, thank you.
So.
This is recorded, right?
Streaming live right now.
Okay, so people can watch this meeting later.
Correct.
Thank you.
Kevin Post, 97258 West 129. I'm going a little different direction. I was just wondering if you guys could explain to us how this project was financed? And is the entire project funded now, or will there be funding needed for the following, the second, third, and fourth year, whatever goes forward?
No.
So there were 4 sources of funds that were identified. So we issued the RDA lease rental bonds. I believe it was April 7th of last year when they closed. We also committed wastewater funds, as well as each year we'll be applying for the LAIR grant. And then the ecosystem non-reverting fund, which is made up of the donations from the CLIA group.
And how much was committed out of wastewater?
A little over 4.3, I believe it is. I'd have to completely tally it up.
Out of wastewater, it's 4.3?
Mm-hmm. The only thing that is not funded at this time would be what we're considering phase 3, which is an alum treatment, which is roughly a $2 million estimated cost, which would essentially, if you want to think of it as the remaining sediment in the lake after we're done, would essentially, aluminum sulfate gets put on the bottom and essentially makes it a hardscape that prevents it from resuspending.
Okay,
so that's a phase 3.
So year 2 is funded, so basically the whole project's funded up to that?
The current dredging contract with Dredge America is funded, yes.
It's the only way you could award the bid.
We wouldn't be allowed to bid it by state statute.
Okay, so the 4.3 wastewater and then the bonds, is that out of the TIF district?
Yes,
How much was that?
it was a 3.9.
Okay, so that wasn't in the TIF district, that would be bonds over X how many years out of the TIF district, So it'll be so many years, right, that money will come out of the TIF district to pay for the 3.9?
Yes, that's the source.
You don't know how many years that'll be, or?
I believe it was a 10-year issuance, but I'd have to look at the closing documents to be 100% sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment?
Bradley Brain, 8116 West 146th Avenue. I just have one general question. Is it necessary that the pipe go down the middle of the lake? Can't it just follow the shoreline? Just a question.
Tyler, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it can't really go down the shoreline. I mean, we take the chance of hitting docks and stuff like that. It's better off for us to go right down through the middle, because it's always going to be moving side to side and stuff like that.
If we run it right down the edge of a shoreline, yeah, like Tyler said, it's gonna be getting up against docks, and there's a chance that there'll be, if we get a storm, and it blows it all to the east side, it could block off a whole lot of docks all at once and do some damage to them. If it's out in the middle, it gives the anchors that are along the pipeline a chance to really dig in and catch something else and stay where it's at.
All right. Sam?
Yes, I apologize, if you don't mind, if you could stay there, ask from here. Sediment is still running rapidly through the ditch right by the Chamber Welcome Center. How are we moving forward with this if we haven't stopped that? And is there a plan to stop that sediment?
So that's the wetland kind of north of the chamber, is what you're referring to, Diane?
Yes.
So that's natural in some respects. That's difficult to stop. I can tell you construction sediment is going to be drastically reduced this year just because of our MS4 program. All developers in town that have access to a tributary that comes into the lake were pretty much warned at the beginning of the year that they need to clean their sites up. That's a primary source of a lot of sediment into the lake over the years, and among other sources. It's certainly not the only. Natural sediment that is generated by, just natural waterways, that's difficult. That's also not the sediment we're most concerned with, especially if it's more of the sandy nature. We're primarily concerned with lighter sediments, clay, silty sediments. Nature's going to do what it's going to do. That's extremely difficult to stop. CLIA's projects over the years have made a significant dent in it by doing a lot of stream bank stabilizations to hardscape a lot of, especially on the west side of the lake for Sleepy Hollow, to prevent some of that natural sedimentation, but that's always going to be a constant battle with any tributary that comes into the lake, whether it be that tributary or Sleepy Hollow or Town Club Ditch or even Pickerel to the south. It's something we would have to combat moving into the future, so we're not, kind of spinning our wheels, if that makes sense.
Don, you mentioned MS4 for the benefit of the audience that may not be aware what MS4 is. It's a federal unfunded mandate.
It is an unfunded federal mandate that requires, especially for what they call Phase 2 communities, which is any community with a population of greater than 10,000 people, institute an MS4 program that among 6 what they call MCMs, which are minimum control measures, that one of them, which is MCM5, is essentially construction inspections for ongoing sites that are greater than 1 acre. And then the other 5 MCMs are anything from public outreach to internal controls of public facilities and several other different items. But part of that mandate is that the town essentially has to create an inspection program to keep an eye on developers to make sure they're not outletting contaminated sediment, which is construction sediment in its simplest form, into waterways. So Dick Carey's in the audience. He got inspected plenty. So every development over an acre has to submit what they call a stormwater pollution prevention plan to IDEM, which gets approved through the permit process through the town, and then they are required on a minimum weekly basis to inspect their site and remit inspections to the town. And then they also have to complete inspections after every half-inch of rainfall over a 24-inch time frame. So we've had it 24, right?
24 inch.
Oh, 24 inch, that'd be weird. So they're all required to complete those inspections. We keep them in a database. We do our own inspections. The town is mandated to do a minimum of 4 inspections per site per year. We end up doing quite a bit more than that to make sure the developers are in compliance. It's a give and take relationship, we'll call it. A lot of developers don't like following that rule because it costs them money, but we stay on them the best we can and issue fines and stop work orders as we go. So that's a very involved process and a very quick answer.
Thank you.
Frank Rangel, 7504 West 134th Place. I'd like to give credit to Bob Gross. 37 years ago, we got together at the snack shop, which isn't there at Pinecrest anymore, and had a pipe dream of getting the lake cleaned up and everything. A lot of the members at that time, they're not here anymore. So I'm probably the happiest person in this room when I do see that 25 by 85 foot barge drop out of the sky and start dredging, because there's not a day that goes by that people keep asking what I did with their money, what did you spend it on and everything else. And, you know, you really get tired of listening to all this stuff. And I listen to it, Diane listens to it daily. You know, lake's gonna be down 4 feet. I'm like, no, it's really 6 feet. And if you wanna believe this stuff, you know, don't even bother.
Yeah.
But a lot of work went into it by a lot of people. We pulled out more than 500 to 1,000 pilings around the lake. We did a lot of different things, cleaning up the inlets to the lake. And Bob, you know, he followed through all these years. So it's been a long time coming. It really is. But we turned over $350,000 to the town. So the fundraising worked, a lot of different things, and, you know, we appreciate tonight with everybody's, like I say, when I see the barge in the lake, I can finally tell a piece back home. Thank you.
And Frank Brongil needs to be commended too, because when they were pulling out those pilings, he was in the water helping lift them up, and he worked very diligently and very hard.
Hello there. Phil Splant. I live 109th, just outside of town, but we make a lot of use of the lake. A couple questions that I think were mentioned earlier, but I don't know where it wound up, was the fish in the lake. I know early on they said if there was a total kill-off of the fish, we planned it right, the state was going to restock the lake, or I know a lot of people I've heard are concerned thinking that fishing all of a sudden is better than it's ever been, according to some people, right? Is there a plan for that?
So the plan for that right now is when this project is over, DNR is going to do a fish kill. And then restock it with new fish and fish that's more, you know, biologically, you know, what should be in there, native. Naturally. There you go. That is the plan, most likely after 2025. I can't tell you the exact timeline on that, but that is the plan for fish, yes.
And when will that kill take place? Early?
I don't know yet.
Yeah.
After 2025, maybe 26.
Well, we're gonna have people wanting to fish throughout this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And they're not gonna realize it until it's too late, so that's good to know.
Yeah.
And one other thing, I've heard speculation one way or the other on springs in this lake. Is this lake, does it actually have springs? And were they plugged up years ago, or was there no springs all over this lake?
It is
And will they
not.
clear it up?
It is not a spring-fed lake.
That's what I thought, okay.
It's called it's a clay kettle lake
Yeah.
that was formed by the glaciers, just like Lake Michigan.
Yes.
And one of the professors that was at the eco-restoration meeting informed me, there are no springs in it. And I said, what about when I was a kid and I felt cold churning water? And he told me that was wind circulating the water in the lake.
Yes, the temperature's all different throughout the lake, right? That's been the biggest one for me. People all think it's spring fed. I didn't think so, but
It is not.
thank you very much. There you go.
Is there any other public comment?
Rich Lauderman, 8503 West 131st Place. I am a lake resident, and the three major hotspots for E. coli outbreaks every year is North Point Marina, South Shore Golf Course, and right in front of our Sandy Beach area here. What steps are we taking on the people that are truly feeding the waterfowl, bringing the mass migration of birds here that naturally don't occur? Okay, because the E. coli is mainly caused by the amount of birds that land and hang out on the golf course area and even by North Point Marina. So, I don't know if you guys have ever been to the marina, but every boat's covered in shit.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to put my boat there, so what kind of things are we doing with DNR and even the council to ensure that what we're doing to clean the lake is going to keep the lake clean?
Cleaning is a different thing, and I will talk to everything but private property, because it's on the private property owners. As far as any town-owned property on the lake, we've been working with the park board to identify, and been working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Purdue Agriculture Extension to look at geese mitigation. The safest, most effective geese mitigation that we can use, short of doing any egg removals, which require state permits, or things of that nature. So we're looking at non-invasive plantings and things of that nature in order to discourage their involvement near the lake.
Okay.
We also passed an ordinance that it's illegal to feed the birds on the lake.
Personally, I spoke with DNR and they are unwilling to do anything about it. So maybe that's something we need to take steps in and ensure that our DNR officers are doing their job as well to ensure safety.
And I met with Sandbar and told them they weren't supposed to be letting them feed the birds, and they posted signs out in their patio area, do not feed the birds.
That is a perfect thing to do. I mean, that's been an increasing issue over the past how many years is, back early 2000s, I don't remember there ever being E. coli warnings. And now increasingly it's getting worse and worse, and the longevity of the time periods are getting longer. And another thing with our sediments, I've seen a lot of older gentlemen that take sediment out of the lake and put it in their gardens, and they produce great vegetables. After this process is done, will there be testing that if that is safely useful for fertilizer? What are we going to be doing with that sediment? Are you just going to spread it over the farm field and leave it and cap it, or are you guys going to truck it out, sell it? What's the true plan with the sediment once it's all done and over with?
We don't know right now. It's going to be to be determined. I think once town officials get to a point where they're, master planning that site for, sports or whatever it turns out to be, yes, it'd probably be prudent to test it just to make sure we're good.
Cool. All right. Thank you, guys.
Margaret, do we have anybody else online?
We have attendees online, but no one has their hands raised. If anybody online would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Yeah.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none then, none online?
Nobody's raised their hand.
All right, well, thank you all for coming out tonight. We'll be here a little longer if you want to take a look at the boards, ask any property-specific questions, and we hope to see you on the lake.